SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
Want to cut your heating costs this season? With a highly efficient York heating and air conditioning system, you can save up to 50% in energy costs while enjoying tax credits and TVA energy rebates as much as $3,000. Your local York dealer. Visit harbonair.com to schedule a free evaluation of your system.
This is Gerard Gibert, and thank you for listening to MidDays here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. Hello. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Midday SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music. Morning, Rhino.
Howdy, howdy.
Well, we had a great Masters tournament for those of us who like that sort of stuff and who track the game of golf. Of course, Masters weekend, man, doesn't get any better than that for a golfer. So pleased to see that the weather was just spectacular, as it was here as well, but it was over in Augusta, Georgia. And, man, the course is just beautiful, unbelievable, incredible. But, wow, what a finish. Doesn't get any better than that. A playoff. Rory McIlroy prevailed after a little problem there going down the stretch. Man, he ends up bogeying number 18 to create a playoff, and then they went back, played again, and he birdied the hole. They both hit their shots, within 10, 15 feet of the hole, of the cup, but Justin Rose had a little bit longer putt. Man. Then Rose's birdie attempt, it failed to break. It stayed a little bit to the right. He thought he had it. But then after McIlroy missed a 5-footer on the 72nd hole, he didn't miss it this time. He threw his putter in the air, put his head in his hands. He fell to his knees, and he wept before he stood up and hugged his caddy. Man, it was incredible. So now he is one of 6 players, I believe, who have won in separate years the Grand Slam of golf. That's quite the accomplishment. He will go down in golf history, of course, for that. Really something. Tiger Woods, he posted a tweet, said, "Welcome to the club. Rory, completing the Grand Slam at Augusta is something special. Your determination during this round and this entire journey has shown through, and now you're part of history. Proud of you." That was really good. You know, golf is one of those games, Rhino, you'd have to agree that there's a lot of respect and camaraderie among the players. I mean, they're fierce competitors, make no mistake. And it's one of the few sports where you're competing as an individual.
I think that's the main reason why.
I think you're right.
Because you're not, while you're technically competing against those in the field, they are your indirect competitor. Your direct competitor is yourself.
That's exactly
and
right.
Nature.
But
even though it may be man-made nature, it's nature.
I agree. And that's what makes it...
Or man-shaped nature. Maybe man-made, not the right term.
Kind of cool. Honestly, is what I like about the game is that it's one of the few games, if you think about it, where a player will impose a penalty on himself. He'll call himself out for violating the rules. You've seen that happen before in the game of golf. And calling attention to that to a rules official who will then assess that penalty. Doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it just, I don't know, makes you feel good that there's some honorable people and they play the sport that way as well. So Rory McIlroy winning the Masters in a playoff to earn a career Grand Slam. It's really incredible. 89th Masters, Augusta National Golf Club. We need some of them $1.50 pimento cheese sandwiches here, don't we? You have to give it to the Augusta National Golf Club. They've kept the clamp down, haven't let inflation run away. When I went in 97, they were $1 for a pimento cheese sandwich. Really incredible. And wow, the crowds were huge. Drones flying above. That was kind of neat, seeing that footage. Hadn't really had that in the past. But the green jacket belongs to Rory McIlroy. So, over the weekend as well, it's kind of hard to keep up with all the moves the president makes with respect to tariffs. And the latest that came late Friday after we were off the air was an announcement from the White House that electronics made in China would not be subject to the reciprocal portion of the tariffs. Of course, that would include iPhones, switches, routers, semiconductors. All those are in that category. The president said these products are subject to the existing 20% fentanyl tariffs, and they're all just moving to a different tariff bucket. We are looking at semiconductors and the whole electronic supply chain and the upcoming national security tariff investigations. Really is kind of hard to keep up with. But a myriad of devices are not subject to the much higher reciprocal tariffs, the 20% tariffs on fentanyl still in place. These things were subject to, or at least facing, tariffs of up to 145% under the new rules. But the president, he shifted gears on that this past Friday, and that has provided some relief to the markets. All are in the green today. Pretty nice rally underway right now. Even Bitcoin, it's up about $1,100. It's above 84,000 now. So it's having a decent day. The Dow up 370, the NASDAQ up 203. That's off session highs. NVIDIA has announced they're going to spend $500 billion in the United States to make their Blackwell GPUs. Now, most of their chips have been made in Taiwan. What's the TSMC? I think the big semiconductor manufacturer in Taiwan. So now they're saying we're going to invest. And they listed, I think Dallas perhaps is one location. There's Phoenix, another one, I think, Rhino, and among the list of locales where they intend to produce these chips. Now, the thing about making these chips is you don't need a lot of people in the factory to punch them out. Almost all done, as we've talked about on the show, with robotics and extremely sophisticated, advanced manufacturing technology. So,
yeah, according to the most recent article I can find on it, they have already started production at TSMC's chip plant in Phoenix, Arizona, and NVIDIA will begin building manufacturing plants in Texas, in Houston, and Dallas.
Okay. That sounds about right. So, by the way, 80%, I think, of Apple iPhones are made in China, if I'm not mistaken. Data I looked at, 80% of Apple products, actually, not just iPhones. And that's according to Evercore ISI. It's interesting to watch CEO Tim Cook. He has been courting the president a bit, trying to cozy up to him and improve relations with Trump, given the tariff push. for obvious reasons.
In fairness, Tim Cook says pretty much what he needs to say, depending on what country he's sitting in.
That is absolutely true.
There was a video over the weekend from a couple of years ago, I think it was actually pre-COVID, where he was discussing why iPhones were made in China. And he was rebuffing the argument that it's because of cheap labor. He was saying it's because of the sheer amount of specialized labor, while ignoring the fact that that specialized labor is much cheaper in China than it would be anywhere else.
Yeah, I don't think I'm buying that, honestly.
But he was also in mainland China giving that speech.
Of course he was. So he's appealing to, right, the crowd there, the participants, the attendees of the speech. Yeah. Well, we're going to step aside for a break. We've got Dr. Ken Cyree. He's the Dean of the School of Business at Ole Miss. He'll join us today at 11:05 to discuss his thoughts on the tariff situation. Right now, it's Steve Perry on the lead vocals with Journey. Faithfully. Coming right back. Stay with us. This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
Now back to Middays with Gerard here on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
A little Zeppelin on this Monday. Love it. So as we just passed on, the president sparing smartphones, computers, other electronics imported from China. They have been spared for the reciprocal tariffs, which no doubt would have had an impact on the price of these goods in this country. The 20% fentanyl tariffs, that's what they're called, on all Chinese imports remains in place. So smartphones, laptops combined were the largest category of U.S. imports from China last year, roughly 30% of everything we import. I was a little surprised to learn that the total value, you and I talked about it Monday, of imports from China, less than $500 billion. In an economy, our economy, the GDP is $31 trillion. A little surprised at that. I would have expected it to be much greater. And that, I think, further illustrates that the reaction from the markets was overblown. Almost every Wall Street analyst is now saying that, yeah, there's some cause for concern, but this sell-off was way too deep, too extensive, given the situation. The president says they're close to cutting deals with several countries, and I think as soon as that happens, you are going to see markets really move even further into the bull category at this point. And then, of course, we're trying to get one big beautiful bill done to extend or make permanent the Trump tax cuts, plus perhaps add some additional tax cuts, also cut some spending. But the main thing is we got to keep in place at a minimum what we have today. If we don't, there will be a significant tax increase imposed on American taxpayers come January 1, 2026. because we will, without a deal, revert to the tax environment in Barack Obama's last year. Actually, it was last year for him, the first year of President Trump's first term. We don't want that. That would absolutely wreak havoc on the economy in a big sort of way. So the Congress is actually off. They're off for the long Easter break. Don't think they're going back, Rhino, to the 28th of this month. They'll be here or at home if that's where they choose to go, but certainly not in session for the next couple of weeks. And
maybe that poor Congresswoman will finally get to spend some time with her baby.
That's right. Representative Luna is whom you're referring to there. That wants
Is it Luna?
Was it Luna? I don't know. Maybe not. I thought it was.
I don't think she'll still be there in a few years, so I didn't bother learning her name.
It's kind of bizarre. If you hadn't heard, folks, she's lobbying for some legislation in the Congress that would allow maternity or family leave. Really, you can't call it maternity leave anymore because we can't discriminate against the male parent. If you can figure out which one's which, that's a big problem right there. We're in a bit of an identity crisis here in this country, for at least some that are still delusional about that. But yeah, she was lobbying to have some paid leave or just time off after delivery, but still participate as a member of Congress in voting. So remote voting, if you will. I think in essence that's what she was pushing for. And the Speaker, I would applaud him for this. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, says, just don't think this is a good idea, and this could set a very dangerous precedent. I'm with him on that.
Well, it didn't really help her case that every time she argued for it, she showed up with her baby to perform her official duties.
Yeah, like on the House floor there, right?
So if it's that hard to do, why would you prove that it's not that hard to do?
Right.
Or why would you ignore the fact that there's a daycare paid for by our tax dollars in the House?
Yeah. Anna Paulina Luna, is that right? I think so. She's the one that wanted proxy voting for new parents. And they both, there was two of them.
Brittany Peterson was the one with the baby. Luna was the Republican that they could call it bipartisan.
That's right. Peterson, a Democrat from Colorado. And Luna said, yeah, we worked as a team. I thought Luna did as well. Maybe Luna was holding Peterson's baby. I don't know. But they're working together to pass legislation that would allow new parents to vote by proxy for 12 weeks around the birth of a new child. But Speaker of the House said, I'm not crazy about that deal. And he got, I guess, a bit confrontational with them, honestly, on that. There were some Republican lawmakers who voted alongside Luna and some Democrats as well. I was a little surprised. Tim Burchett of Tennessee, Mike Lawler, and Nick LaLotta of New York, Kevin Kiley of California, Max Miller of Ohio, Greg Stube, a Republican from Florida, Jeff Van Drew, Republican from New Jersey, Ryan McKenzie of Pennsylvania. I was a little surprised at that. They, I guess, peeled off from the rest of the Republicans. So, we'll see.
You're surprised that members of Congress want to find ways to not have to do their job more?
Oh, I guess I shouldn't be, huh?
No.
Yeah. I guess so. I think this is a bad idea. You know this when you sign up for it. I think that's the point. And there's so much of our society's that way, like, oh, wait, I didn't know that. I got to be here to vote. No, you knew that when you signed up for it. It's fine. Have a baby. Nobody's interfering with your right to do so. But just understand, if you do that, you want to take off, you're not present on the floor, you can't vote.
I'm just saying it defeats the purpose of arguing I can't be here because of my baby when you're there with your baby.
Yeah. So what the Speaker of the House said, he told this to NPR on his way out, and there were other reporters available as well there, said that the agenda has been taken off the table. He argued that allowing proxy voting, quote, would do great violence to the institution to reopen Pandora's box. He just said it's unconstitutional and it's a slippery slope. Quote, if you allow it for some situations, you're ultimately going to have to allow it for all. I totally agree. Who's to say that, hey, your reason for not being here because you just had a child, well, that's no more important or more justifies a proxy vote than my reason, which could be I just wanted to stay home and, I don't know, cut the grass or something. You could come up with anything. And the next thing you know, you got this long list, right, of potential excuses and reasons not to be present to do your job. Just don't run. If you can't do it and you can't adhere to the rules of the institution, it ain't that dang hard. Man, oh man. So, on a feel-good story, why don't you talk about this one? The Louisiana native Debbie LaFleur lost her dog, Kingston, 5 years ago.
The little Yorkie Kingston was missing after a hurricane. I forget the hurricane's name. It's been 5 years, but the little Yorkie that could has been surviving somehow for these 5 long years. And the guys at Kappa Sig on the campus of Southern Miss noticed the Yorkie kind of meandering around their front porch there, so they scooped him up, took him inside, named him Benji, and started taking care of him. The next day, the vice president of the fraternity, I believe, took it to the vet, got the chip checked, come to find out, oh, your name's not Benji, it's Kingston, and we can contact your owner. Contacted the lady. I think the lady was at work. She went into her boss's office screaming, I found Kingston! I got Kingston! They were all screaming and crying. They had a big reunion. The videos are all over the internet.
Yeah, the video's awesome. Seeing them reunited. Proud of my fraternity brothers, by the way. That's pretty cool. We have an alumni meeting tonight. I'm sure we'll discuss that. That's pretty cool. We're coming right back in the Element Well studio.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert, here on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Scruggs.
You ever seen the music video for this?
I haven't.
It's got everybody. If you can think of a musician that has played an instrument on the Grand Ole Opry stage or anywhere in Nashville, or even the comedian Steve Martin with his banjo, they're all a part of And Friends with Earl Scruggs and Friends when they do this in the music video.
It used to be him and Lester Flatt.
Oh, yeah.
And the Froggy Mountain Boys or something like that. They, of course, were really made popular with the Ballad of Jed Clampett, the theme song from the Beverly Hillbillies.
Oh, yeah.
Y'all come back now. Granny waving on her hand. Oh, that was awesome. The reruns are still hilarious, honestly. So there's something we should be looking out for with respect to the Congress up there in Washington as they craft the one big beautiful bill. We have a framework, and so now we've sent all the members of the House back to their respective committees to draft the details of the one big beautiful bill. And I think there's a little confusion about it, Rhino, because the framework, the blueprint, if you will, simply says you got this much for tax cuts, you got to cut this much, and it's kind of a range on the spending side, and then come back to us with the details of what that looks like. That's what's underway presently. Of course, they're off for a couple of weeks. Not much is underway while they're in a break right now. But the Medicaid program, the Democrats have really been fear-mongering about Medicaid. It $620 billion a year, some 72 to 74 million enrolled in the program across the country, administered by the states at the state level within certain guidelines. And, of course, it's a matching funding program. The state picks up a portion, the federal government picks up a portion, and the minimum the federal government will cover is 50%. In Mississippi, it's 78%. It's based on the per capita income of the state. So poorer states get more help from the Fed. Since Mississippi has the lowest per capita income in the country, we receive the highest federal match at 78%. The state picks up 22%. Here's what's going on, though. They're looking at numerous ways, they being the Congress, of cutting spending specifically on the Medicaid program. And one of the proposals is to change the way the states fund their portion. Now, the states basically fund their Medicaid match with plain old general funds. In the state of Mississippi, that's just under $1 billion a year, and that's matched up with the federal government's $7 billion plus of funding for the Medicaid program. Some of those funds at the state level are covered by taxes imposed on providers. So they're kind of an obscure set of taxes on hospitals and other health providers that you don't really hear a lot about. But the idea is they're willing to pay taxes to the state just to extend coverage to more people and tweak and tune their program to allow more people to be enrolled and covered under Medicaid, within the framework that the federal government prescribes, just to have some way to get reimbursed whenever they deliver services to these people. Because otherwise, they just eat it. It's uninsured. They are bound by federal law to take care of patients who are sick, at least to stabilize them, is what the law says. And that could be an expensive proposition if someone doesn't have insurance or other means to pay. So they're willing to pay taxes to the state government, again, to sort of widen the population that is eligible to participate. And the Congress is looking at these provider taxes that are used by states as a way to, again, expand their programs, which means more federal money. And they're actually looking at banning that practice. You can't use provider taxes, state government, as a way to tap more federal Medicaid dollars. And that's a way you could cut federal Medicaid spending, because no doubt without those provider taxes, fewer people would be eligible for the Medicaid program. Mississippi is no exception. But, man, there have been a lot of reports written about California where it's out of control. The provider taxes and the provider tax structure specifically, and the amount of money that has been raised in California that it then pairs up with federal funds to grow its Medicaid program and to keep it very extensive. This is a way that sort of indirectly, if you will, you could cut federal funding on Medicaid without, I guess, directly saying, we're just not going to pay you as much for Medicaid. This would be interesting. It's something to watch for sure. The executive vice president for the American Hospital Association says cutting the taxes, quote, would be devastating. Quote, it would certainly create a financial strain on the ability to continue to provide these services. So the problem is the government says, you got to take care of these people. You don't have a choice. I guess you do have a choice, as long as you participate in the Medicare program. And I don't know that there's a hospital out there in the country, Rhino, that doesn't participate in Medicare. That would be highly unusual. That would be some sort of boutique facility that would only serve wealthy people. And we may have some in this country. I'm just not familiar with them. I'm talking about a full-service hospital here, not specialty clinics, plastic surgery, for example. There are lots of those specialty-type clinics that only take commercial insurance, only cater to a certain segment of the population that can afford it. We're talking about a general-type hospital with an emergency room that ends up providing lots of uninsured care. That's who would be affected. You're going to have to take care of these people, but they don't have any insurance. You just got to eat it. That's a problem. So we're going to be keeping an eye on that, see where that goes. And that's something that lawmakers in the state of Mississippi should be considering as well. Of course, they got a little time because we don't have a budget here in the state. And there may be a decision on this exact provision before the Mississippi legislature convenes to pass a budget. They should consider that. Now, it won't go into effect immediately, but in the future, the state of Mississippi, I think, is going to have to deal with potential cuts to the Medicaid program. It's the number 2 spending category in the general fund in the state. I believe it is in virtually every state. It follows education, which consumes slightly more than half of general fund spending in Mississippi. It's going to be a huge deal that we're going to have to take a look at. On the C Spire text line, Charles in Mathiston says, are the tariffs on wholesale cost? Yeah, what's called the landed cost, Charles, and those, again, are paid by the importer, the American importer. They are not paid by the foreign country that shipped the goods into this country, such as China. They're paid by the American company that imports those goods from China. They would remit directly to the United States Treasury any duties due accordingly on imports. That's the way that works. Mo says she and the speaker are talking about Anna Paulina Luna along with Peterson, Representative Peterson, a Democrat from Colorado. They paired up to get some legislation passed in the United States House that would allow proxy voting after having a child. I think actually even leading up to the birth. It's like 12 weeks around the birth event itself. He says she and the speaker reached a deal where they could pair with someone who is on the opposite side of the issue. She gets to vote remotely, but it will not influence the outcome. Yeah, we have similar rules here in Mississippi, Mose. That's not unusual. I actually thought that was already available.
I'm fairly certain it was.
Yeah. So I don't know that anything has really changed with respect to that. I get nervous when I hear banjos. We had Earl Scruggs playing a minute ago. Oh, let's see here. Vandalay Industries is taking a hit right now. I'm not familiar with the companies. To help us out, is that a Mississippi-based company, and are you referring to tariffs, or what am I missing there, Rhino?
I'm fairly certain that was who employed George Costanza on Seinfeld.
Oh, got you. I'm not a big Seinfeld fan, so I wouldn't know. We're coming right back. We got Dr. Ken Cyree from Ole Miss at 11:05, pardon me.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard here on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Get off of my cloud, says Mick Jagger and the Stones. Well, the Dow, the exuberance didn't last long, Rhino. It's now up 58 points. The volatility index still kind of high, and that's why. And the NASDAQ still in the green, but just barely. So, wow, what a difference a couple of hours makes. Out there in Seattle, this was pretty good. Some fans got on the Jumbotron by wearing shirts that spelled out, "Go Mariners." But as soon as they were caught by the camera and it was projected on the big screens in the stadium, they turned around and the message was a bit different. It said, "Sell the team." It turns out the Mariners have only made the playoffs 5 times in their 48-year history. They've never been to the World Series. Sell the team. Wow. Man, oh man. That's pretty good. I have to give it to him. So, what about the lady, did you see this, who called out Anderson Cooper for misgendering her? Did you happen to see that, Cooper?
Oh, yeah.
Unbelievable. Anderson Cooper, he gets corrected after he misgendered a civil rights attorney at a town hall event that was hosted by Bernie Sanders. What does he say?
Give me all your money.
I don't know if we have the video. We'll try to get it for you. We can play it. But, man, she snapped right back, didn't she, after Cooper introduced her, Grace Thomas.
Here we go.
Paul, we're back with Senator Bernie Sanders. I want to introduce Grace Thomas. She's a local civil rights attorney. She's a Democrat. Grace?
They them pronouns, actually. Thank you.
Oh,
Good evening, Senator Sanders. Polling and turnout data indicate that men of all racial demographics are turning away from the Democratic Party. But of course,
that is just...
I wonder why men of all demographics are turning away from the Democratic Party.
That is like the quintessential sanctimonious, pompous, woke liberal. It's they, them, actually. Oh, my gosh. Now, Bernie, what did he do? His reaction was a bit interesting as well because he had kind of an awkward smile on his face. It was kind of a funny moment. He really knew he couldn't get a genuine laugh out because the nutcases would be all over him if he did. So it was just kind of a half-cocked smile. But he found it humorous. No doubt. I found it humorous. Obviously, you can hear me laugh and apologize for that. But it's just, again, they're so serious. It's they, them, actually. Like, it's not anything to be serious about. Now, isn't Anderson out of the closet gay as well? And he blew it. How did he not ask, what are your preferred pronouns? Doesn't he know that's the rule? Man, I'm sure there's some punishment within liberal la-la land for that, isn't there? You didn't check to ask the guest, what are your preferred pronouns?
Well, the first step in punishment is he will have to release a heartfelt, tear-streaming, sitting in front of the camera, crying about his apology and how he will do better to be better and learn more and listen and center those that are other than him to be a better person and all that kind of nonsense.
That's just how upside down we are in this country, if you think about it.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. He's not a Republican, so he won't face the cancel culture backlash from all the losers that have nothing better to do than to get their panties in a twist.
He gets a pass. That is exactly right. He gets a waiver. That's what happens here. I don't know. What is a person thinking about this they, them pronoun garbage and how they have to correct you?
They're thinking, I really want attention, and this is a great way to force people to give me attention.
I guess. I mean, I have a name that is frequently mispronounced and misspelled. I often, unless it's official and it's necessary, I won't interrupt or it's somebody or correct them. It's just not that big a deal. That's fine. I get it. It's a normal, natural mistake. It's unimportant. That's the point. Just as her pointing out, it's they, them pronouns. That's just unimportant. It really is.
But it's important to her.
Oh, my gosh.
Or they.
Oh, man. They. That's fantastic. We're stepping aside for a break right now. It's top of the hour. That means it's time for Fox News and SuperTalk News. On the other side of the break, it's Dr. Ken Cyree. He's the Dean of the School of Business at the University of Mississippi. Hour of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
That's what I like to listen to.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert. Here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's hour 2 of Middays. We are live in the Element Wealth Studio. It's our pleasure to welcome Dr. Ken Cyree. He is a professor of finance and also the dean of the School of Business Administration at Ole Miss. Dr. Cyree, always good to see you, sir. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Gerard. I appreciate you having me. Always great to be on.
You bet. All right, so we've been talking a lot the last couple of weeks, including today, about the tariffs that the Trump administration has imposed and negotiations underway. Of course, the big holdout at this point appears to be China, which is, I think, our third largest trading partner from an import perspective behind Canada and Mexico. Of course, most of what we get from Canada is oil. And then with respect to other imports from Canada and Mexico, a lot of that is American companies who manufacture in those countries, and to some extent that's true in China, but I just don't see China bending at this point. Dr. Cyree, what do you think?
Well, that's a tough call, right? That's the $64,000 question, but I do agree with you. I think that they believe they can wait us out and that Trump will bend to political pressure. I don't know that I would want to place that bet if I were them, but they appear to be headed in that direction. So it's been very interesting. A lot of uncertainty, and markets don't like uncertainty. Bankers don't like uncertainty. Business people don't like uncertainty. So I think a lot of what we've seen over the last 5 or 7 or 8 days, whatever it's been, has really just been that. It's the uncertainty of what's going to happen. I do think long run it'll be good for the economy. Certainly, if we see interest rates come down, which we've seen a mixed bag there. Oil prices have come down, again, a mixed bag there too to some extent. And prices are all over the place depending on what you're talking about. And, I do think, for example, if Trump would have come out and given a speech about, I think tariffs should go down in other countries for U.S. products, you and I both know absolutely nothing would have happened. But the way that he's done it, now all of a sudden I think the other countries are saying, now, wait a minute, we may or may not agree with it, but for sure it's going to impact our country too. So they're willing to come to the table and talk. And I think that's a lot of what President Trump is trying to do. I'm not on his team. I don't know anybody in the inside there who can tell me that, but that's just my sense that I get in watching from afar, that it's a little of both. It's to generate revenue, it's to get people to the table, it's to create a level playing field. And if all of that can happen, I think it'll be good in the long run. Maybe not in the short run, but in the long run.
So what do you think, Dr. Cyree, about the oscillation in the announcement? We've got an announcement, we're putting these tariffs on, and then we back off a week later and say, hey, look, we're going to pause that for a while. Of course, huge market sell-off right after the announcement, and then over the weekend, Friday late, he says, "Okay, we're gonna pause or exempt certain devices, electronics, smartphones, chips, routers, switches, computers, etc., coming from China from the reciprocal tariffs." But he said, "But look, that doesn't mean that's permanent," and that's the uncertainty we're talking about. That's really rattling markets, and it's difficult to operate a business in that environment, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. Whether or not it's planned, I don't know. It's probably one of two things. Either he planned to do this because that gives maximum pressure for negotiation, or he's listening to people that are advising him saying, look, this is a bad idea. We need to slow this roll down a little bit and try to figure out what makes the most sense that's the best for the United States. Or perhaps the third option is he realizes, okay, that particular move was a mistake and I'm going to correct that. So I don't have a problem with any of those three scenarios. I would rather, even if he thought it was a mistake and he's backing it down, I would rather him do that than just stay on a particular policy just because he doesn't want to admit he's wrong. So I'm glad to see that they're adjusting. This is uncharted territory. Oddly enough, Gerard, I've gotten this question a lot over the last week about tariffs, and my answer has largely been, look, when I was in school, in graduate school in the 90s, we didn't talk about tariffs. Or if you did, it was 10 seconds, right? Tariffs used to exist in the 1800s, and you moved on. So it's not something that people my age, at least, have thought about very much. So we don't know what we're doing. We're in new territory here, uncharted waters. And, I do think there will be a benefit at the end, but it was going to be some choppy waters for sure, I think, for a while.
Yeah. Dr. Cyree, it would be purely speculative, but just really seeking your opinion on this more than anything, is to what extent do you think the tumult in the bond markets played a role in the president coming forth last week and announcing a pause in the tariffs? You've seen this. There's been some delevering and selling of U.S. Treasuries going on to an extent that I don't think I can remember, except, I don't know, last time I saw anything like that. It's probably been 40, 50 years, honestly.
Yeah, a lot of volatility in bond markets. If you're really into some of these theories about they tried to tank the interest rate so they could refinance the debt, I don't know that they were really trying to do it. Maybe they were, I don't know. But, that's kind of like saying I know the cards you're holding in your hand in our game of poker, which is pretty unlikely. So I think so. I think they're getting real-time feedback. I think the Secretary of the Treasury is doing a good job, too, giving Trump some solid feedback. But I do think it's not wise to look strictly at short-term market volatility, but try to think about where we need to be in 6 months or a year or even 5 years. That's kind of the knock on the U.S. business environment, is that everybody's so focused on the next quarterly earnings report or whatever. We need to make better decisions based upon the long term. So I'm okay with a little bit of, I'm okay with a little volatility, but I freaked out just like everybody else watching my stock portfolio decline by 15% in about 2 days. So, yeah, it's tough.
Something that I don't think many folks really understand, and it is kind of complicated. Those in the financial industry certainly do. It's called the basis trade, and this is a common practice among hedge funds that basically borrow money to go buy Treasury securities, and then they use the Treasury securities as collateral, then turn around. I think I'm explaining this right, my understanding of it, then turn around and buy Treasury futures and sell the Treasuries, and just kind of shifting the dollars around and making a small amount of money, but on big dollars with this basis trade.
Yeah, that's a very good explanation. And there are a lot of levered trades you can do, whether it's Bitcoin or a stock or any derivative you want, a commodity, oil or corn or whatever, in those same manners. And I think what this really did was it showed the volatility and the problems in some of these markets. Things work great till they don't. Yeah. And as Warren Buffett said, right, when the tide goes out, you get to see who's been swimming naked. And that's kind of an ugly thought here for some of us, perhaps. But it is really and truly created a lot of turmoil. Some of it I think is good because you are exposing the things that maybe don't make a lot of sense. But all else constant, I do think long run it'll be good for the economy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe some of this delevering, which does pressure the bond market. We've got yields rising, and the bad news there is that, as you know, the 10-year drives mortgage rates, chattel mortgages, consumer credit card rates as well. And when we saw the 10-year spike up on the same day that the Dow dropped 2,000 points, I really do think that's what got the president to come out and make a public announcement. We're going to pause this thing. He said they got yippy, is what he said.
Yeah, I think you're right. They will never tell us that probably, but they're definitely watching interest rates and they're watching the markets too. I think Trump is more concerned at the moment with kind of getting this thing done more permanently.
Yeah.
I hope that we can get it done. A lot of the things he's doing, I really like, that we can get it done a little bit more permanently. But, a great example in addition to the tariffs is the Doge stuff. I watched that and it just makes me want to pull my hair out when you find out some of the fraud. And rather than dealing with the fraud of 140-year-olds getting Social Security, we want to yell at Elon, or some people do. It makes me crazy, I think. But we've got to get a handle on this stuff so that we can get the ship righted and move in the right direction. And hopefully they will be able to do that. But the tariffs, like I said, it's one of those three options. Either they looked at things and said, okay, we need to back off here, back off there. Maybe it's a negotiating tactic. I don't know. Or maybe they had it planned exactly like that all along. It's just tough to know.
We're up against a break. If you can hang around, we can continue the discussion. You good with that, Dr. Cyree?
Sure.
All right. We got Dr. Ken Cyree. He is the Dean of the School of Business at Ole Miss. We're coming right back after a break. We're in the Element Wealth studio.
Pickup truck. Middays with Gerard Gibert. Let's do this. On SuperTalk, Mississippi. Let's go.
Little bits of Bakersfield.
Welcome back, everyone. We've got Dr. Ken Cyree. He's a professor of finance, also the dean of the School of Business Administration at Ole Miss. We're talking about the Trump tariff strategy. So, Dr. Cyree, what about this trade deficit? When you look at the strategy, and I know you said earlier you think in the long run this will be good for Americans and America's economy. It's a bit unclear, though, exactly what the goal is, and maybe there are multiple goals and objectives. And I think that's probably what the Trump administration could have improved on. They seem to even be acknowledging that. Some in his inner circle that are speaking on behalf of the White House are trying to now sort of get ahead of this thing and speak more in specific terms about what the goals are. Is it to reshore American manufacturing and bring lots of those factories that were sent overseas for cheap labor back into this country? Is it to produce revenue from the tariffs? Is it to eliminate the so-called trade deficit, the difference between what we import and what we export? Is it some of all the above?
I really do think it's all of the above. And I also think that they're looking at the currency too, right? Because the problem is that China or any other country for that matter could devalue their currency and try to make it more difficult on us that way as a point of leverage. But the part that you mentioned that I think is incredibly important is the manufacturing base. And when you think about, for example, making semiconductors or something like that where you need rare earth minerals, I don't even really know what rare earth minerals are. I know the people that are really smart and do those things know what that is. Apparently they're pretty rare, right? I guess hence the name. So but we don't need to be depending on China for everything or any one country for everything. And, in any business, you don't want to have a sole supplier for something that's critical to your business. So if you think about it in those terms, the United States doesn't need to get in a spot where we don't make X, whatever X is, if we really do need that. If it's a plastic toy or a little small steel part or something like that that's easy to manufacture, that's different. But certainly with respect to defense and things like that, I believe that, that's something that they're trying to work on with these tariffs to try to reshore some of this manufacturing. And I do think that's a good thing. That'll take some time, though. You don't just build a new car plant or something like that in 15 minutes. It will take a little time. But I do think that it is an all-of-the-above strategy. And by the way, Trump has been thinking about tariffs since the 90s. I saw a video the other day from the 90s where he was talking about this.
Yeah.
So this is not some flippant thing he threw out there last week. He really believes this is the way to go. And certainly if you look at the differential tariffs that were across countries, it was quite shocking to me in some cases, some of the differences that we were paying versus what they were paying. And what they were saying is, look, we're trying to protect our local manufacturing from American products. But yet when we go to do that, they say, well, wait a minute, this is the worst thing that's ever happened is these tariffs. You guys are very mean. But no, I do think it's an all-of-the-above strategy. And I do think we're going to have some turmoil for a while. I don't know how long a while is. I hope it's relatively short-lived, but it'll be challenging, I think, for a little bit. Probably the next 3 months to 6 months, at least, I would guess. But I don't know. It may all be squared away in a month, or it may go on for a year or two. Who knows?
Totally hard to tell. You brought up another dimension that I totally agree with, which is the national security aspect of this. It doesn't make sense that there are some goods that are just critical to our safety and our overall prosperity, economic prosperity, that we're relying on what really is a foe on the world stage to produce. I mean, China could tomorrow say, hey, look, we're not shipping you any more antibiotics, for example. I noted also that we import lots of parts for nuclear power plants in this country, are actually manufactured abroad in China. Trade and open trade and just negotiating tariffs, to me, Dr. Cyree, and get your take on this, is a lot easier when you're dealing with honest people who share the same values we do about human life and just markets in general, but trying to negotiate with communists, honestly, and a communist regime that has very little regard for human life and, in fact, just puts the country above individual people in life, that complicates and compounds this effort, does it not?
Oh, it absolutely does, and that's what has made this so difficult. If you saw the other day Kevin O'Leary, who was talking about the Chinese stealing IP and all the things that they do, they don't play by the rules. They don't respect the law. And that's not a political or opinionated criticism. That's just a fact. And so we have to deal with that. And if you're going to buy products from someone you don't trust, you can do that. But you better make sure that you have safeguards in place to make the processing and the transaction work as well as it can, given that you don't trust the person. So, or in this case, the country. So it really creates a conundrum for something like military goods or something that's critical to our infrastructure. Again, I don't know if this is true or not. I saw a story about them making the power grid parts.
Right.
And if they, if we had those pulled back, we would be in a world of hurt. If the power grid went down and we didn't have the parts to make that whole again. So there's a lot of things like that. Antibiotics, one you mentioned, everybody's talked about that probably, but that's a huge problem. One thing I will say, too, another point that's really good in our favor, no matter what you're making, let's say you're making a plastic toothbrush that we carry with us when we travel, very cheap toothbrush, and we're getting those from China. And the reason is we cannot do them in the United States cheaply. Well, probably the U.S. manufacturer is looking at making, maybe 10,000 of them. And then with the tariff, the Chinese product becomes too expensive. So now the U.S. manufacturer can ramp up scale. And instead of making 10,000, maybe they make 200,000 or 2 million, and those costs go down. So that effect will happen too, and how that will play out remains to be seen in the future. It's unseen at the moment, and there's a lot of secondary effects here that we don't know how they're going to play out because we've never dealt with tariffs since 100 and something years ago.
Certainly not to this degree. Ronald Reagan, in the 80s, of course, he imposed tariffs on some of the semiconductor products imported from Japan because, honestly, they were breaking a pact. It was really more about citing them for that, and ultimately that got worked out. So I have this opinion, just want to get your response as well, that maybe we're overshooting a little bit the effect of job creation as a result of reshoring manufacturing, that the next generation of factory, to your example of making toothbrushes, I'm not sure there'll be any humans in a plant that makes toothbrushes in the future. You're absolutely right. When you're scaling, you can drive costs down. You got a certain amount of fixed costs, and then you've also got input costs as well. And if you're buying more, usually you can negotiate more favorably with your vendors of those products. So all that contributes to being more competitive on the world stage. I don't think Americans will pay a super premium for American-made goods, but I do think we're facing a period where automation and technology could allow us to essentially reshore and replace what's being built at ridiculous, almost indentured servitude labor rates in this country.
Yeah, that's true. And we compete primarily through efficiency and productivity. We don't compete with low wages, and there are plenty of countries who do compete with low wages, but they're going to win if it's a very low skill, low labor, low technology product. They're going to win that, and frankly, they should. They should be able to do that. You can still have a tariff on them and still have a very affordable product. We need to be making things that are a little bit more complicated, and to some extent, we certainly do, right?
Yeah.
We're making the complicated things in the United States, but when we were young, Gerard, there were plenty of factories around right here in Mississippi, furniture factories and all sorts of things where people made furniture or something similar, textiles or something like that in the United States. I grew up in a textile area, and those plants are pretty much gone. So the onshoring will affect that. I'm certain it will, but you're right, not to the extent that chicken in every pot kind of political speech there. You're going to see, I think, some resurgence, but not where every person now has 12 job offers to work in something. But we'll need to retrain some skills too, I think, because we've lost a lot of manufacturing in the last 40 years. And, usually when we do get those manufacturing plants, it creates a real great economic impact above and beyond the direct impact. We've seen that with the car plants in Mississippi, whether it's Nissan or Toyota, and the ancillary products that come out of that are really, really good. So, I'm hopeful that this will work out. It's just right now it's a little tough, and we have to be patient, which is clearly not my strong suit, but I'm trying to hang in there and have the faith and hope, I think.
Gotcha. Dr. Ken Cyree, Professor of Finance and Dean of the School of Business Administration at Ole Miss, has been our guest. Always good to talk to you, Dean. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, too. It's always good to talk with you.
Yes, sir. We're coming right back, folks, with half an hour remaining of Middays from the Element Wealth Studio.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
It is on
SuperTalk, Mississippi.
We are back in the Element Wealth Studio. Don't forget it's Monday. That means at 12:05 today, it's Ricky Matthews with SuperTalk Outdoors. So the Trump administration was just conducting a live interview, is a live meeting, really, with the president of El Salvador. And he says, that does the president, will not return the person who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador. Looks like the president of El Salvador, and I'm not sure I could properly pronounce his name there, Rhino. Nayib Bukele? Bukele, okay. Looking at a photo. He's been on the screen on the news during the break here. There, we're seated at the Oval Office and had a engaging discussion. And it appears that because the Trump administration has kind of stepped up its use of what is really known as a notorious prison in El Salvador, is being used to hold migrants deported by the United States. So, make sure I get this right, Rhino. Someone was deported incorrectly, right?
Supposedly.
Right, allegedly. That's exactly right.
They had been given papers to leave the country. They then asked the court to stay that letter because they feared they would run into trouble with members from an opposing gang, because that's why he was being deported, was being a member of a gang. And that stay has been in place for better part of a decade, I believe.
Yeah. This was Kilmar Armando Abrigo Garcia, wrongfully deported, allegedly, as Rhino says. So the president, you could tell, just looking at the photos and the video, he's pretty pleased with the El Salvadoran president's words and just comportment there in the, well, looks like the Oval Office to me. And looking at this particular photo, of course, you've got the two leaders flanking the very ornate fireplace. That's usually in the background, what you see. And then there's a sofa, a rather large sofa that's just to the president's left. I can see seated at it Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Attorney General Pam Bondi, and then behind Secretary Kristi Noem, Susan Wiles, Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller's policy, the president's main policy advisor. They're all in this room, and they're talking to the El Salvadoran president. And bottom line is, he says he's not going to return the person who was allegedly mistakenly deported, and also seems to be offering help to this country in addressing its illegal immigration problem, especially as it pertains to crime committed by these illegals. So, president's beaming about that. He really likes what he's hearing there. Interesting. One of the things that Elon Musk has talked about in the past has the low birth rate in this country. He says that we're running out of people, that humans are at risk of becoming extinct as a result. But even in the interim, he's worried about producing enough workers to actually power the economy. And that's because just a lot of people in this country don't seem to have, that are of childbearing age, don't seem to have any interest of starting a family. And there are a lot of countries that are experiencing the same, and they're incentivizing financially couples to have children. Wow. What a complete pivot that is. It seems like it was just yesterday when we were learning about China and Japan, right, with their, I think it was Japan as well, their one-child policy. Did Japan ever impose that? I don't
think Japan ever imposed it. I think there was a time after World War II where the birth rate did drop precipitously because there was a bit of an economic downturn following their defeat in World War II. And it wasn't until probably about 50-51 that they really saw a turnaround for the first time in several years.
China definitely had one.
Yeah, China had one for decades.
I mean, like, if you had your one child and you got pregnant again, like mandatory abortion. Like I said, it's communist. They don't. They don't really care about human life whatsoever.
And there were tons of stories of people fleeing to the more rural western parts of China and smuggling their second or even third child into Tibet or Mongolia.
Yeah, to try to escape that wrath. So there are just a lot of people who are choosing to remain single. The number of single-person households in the U.S. hit a record in 23 at 38.1 million. 42% of adults in 2023 unpartnered. Women are more likely than men to be single. But the number of single-person households went to 29% of total households in 2024. Just to compare, in 1974, one-person households represented 19%. So it's doubled since 1974, roughly 50 years. There's just a lot of folks that are just choosing a lifestyle. It's a sort of a cultural shift where they just don't have any desire to have a family, especially millennials and Gen Zers. They're afraid of following their path or that getting in the way of following their path. So it's falling birth rates. Some of the sociologists are calling this a relationship recession. Oh, they're always good about coming up with fancy little names like that. So people are staying single and choosing that lifestyle. There are a lot of reasons, underlying reasons for that. You can't point to any one thing and say, yeah, that's the deal. That's what's it. But it's concern. I know those who say they don't intend to have a family is increased significantly over the last 5 years, more than doubled. Just young people at childbearing ages saying, yeah, we're just not going to do that. So that's something to just kind of keep an eye on. And that kind of makes me wonder, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself when we talk about reshoring all these factories here. We already have very low unemployment. It's not like there's just a ton of people out there looking for work. We still have a tight labor market. So where the heck are we going to get these people? And if we do increase demand for people, but we aren't increasing the number that need work, well, that obviously causes wages to rise. And that's a good thing if you're a prospective employee or worker. It's a bad thing if you're a consumer, because what rising wages typically equals an increase. It's inflationary, an increase in the cost of the goods being produced, and we all bear that price.
I think the silver lining on that dark cloud of a murky future involving population decline, the silver lining is that there will be warning signs that America can heed in the coming decades. You've already seen the problem of population decline in Japan, where they've seen a serious drop in the populations of rural communities. You have entire ghost towns in parts of middle and northern Japan where there may have been 100 families that lived there in a thriving community 2 or 3 decades ago, and now there's 3 because they've all moved to the cities, or they just haven't had the same population growth that they were experiencing. That's already in place, and you're already seeing some of the societal problems of having an aging population in Japan. But then you look at South Korea. And South Korea, unless something major changes in the coming decades, they will have half of their population gone within 50 years and no one to replace them. You're going to see increasing problems with the economy and the society in South Korea crumbling due to the low birth rate, and that will be a pretty stark warning for America at that point and for the world at that point.
Japan is certainly instructive, you'd have to agree, though, because they're ahead of where we will be unless there's not some turnaround with respect to our low birth rate.
Yeah, the years you're looking at, like Japan will get into a sticky situation in 2090 if nothing has changed.
Yeah.
South Korea is looking at 2060 when things go south, and that's not that far ahead in the grand scheme of things. Whereas if you look at the numbers in America with the declining birth rate, America really doesn't get into a sticky economic situation until 20-something.
I think all these countries, including this one, though, the Social Security costs, and Social Security, by the way, I'm not talking about just a Social Security program per se, but in Japan, they have similar series of benefit programs. People are living a lot longer, and 30% of their population is over 65. We're coming right back.
The One.
Are we going to do this?
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Keep rolling. 3, 2, 1.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays, final segment. So there's still, though, lots of concerns about this population deal. I was just talking earlier before we went to break about potential squeeze on the federal government's budget. I mean, that's already playing out. Social Security, Medicare continue to increase without, of course, any changes, any reforms to those programs. And just keep in mind that the Congress doesn't appropriate to those programs, nor does it appropriate for paying debt interest or TRICARE or veterans benefits, SNAP benefits. But mainly the big ones, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. And when you add all those up, they consume just on their own about 50%. 50%. Total federal spending. So no touches to that means 50%. Then you got debt interest you combine with that. Bottom line, you add all that stuff up, it's on autopilot, it's 70% of spending. So all the consternation and the debate in the Congress about the spending bill and the one big beautiful bill all concerns that part of spending which is discretionary. I was surprised to learn that the life expectancy in Japan is quite high. 87 for women. 87. 81 for men. In this country, it's below 80 in both cases, I believe, right? 79, 77, something like that.
Well, I mean, part of it is the cultural aspect of a very lean and fat diet that is very much limited on the amount of processed food you take in, but also something Rebecca and I have talked about on Good Things and Off the Air is in Japan and some other Asian countries, sleeping is done on a futon, a mattress that you roll out on the floor. And that's all ages. So as the body breaks down and becomes a little less pliable, a little less springy, you can't quite recover as quickly. That kind of gets exacerbated by what we consider staples, but in reality to the world would be luxuries, like an elevated bed with box springs and mattress and pillows and all that, and you don't have to get up off the floor every single morning of your life. So if you're engaged in even that minor bit of physical activity of getting up off the floor when you wake up, that's more than some elderly people in America get.
I've seen reports in the past, it's been 3 or 4 years, that indicate a person's ability, as you say, to sit on the floor with their legs crossed and then get up on their own accord without any help is a predictor of their life expectancy.
Oh, yeah.
Crazy as that is. But
because it's a pretty simple foundational physical movement that when you have allowed yourself to get to the point where you can no longer do that, you're not doing your body a whole lot of good.
Yeah.
Whereas in Japan, like I said, if you're going to bed that night and you're waking up the next morning, you're getting up off the floor.
Well, if you think about working and then retiring, and let's say you retired at 65, you lived at 87, on average, that's incredible. So you can see what kind of pressure that puts on finances, because they have similar Social Security programs for to pay when you're retired, to provide some income when you're retired. Same deal. Thomas says, why have kids when you can't even hope to own a home? Okay. Ben from Madison says, Trump also saying he wants to send American citizens to El Salvador. I saw that, Ben. If we can't push back on that, what the hell can we push back on? Yeah, and just to clarify, he said, like, the worst criminals in our society. I have problems with that too, Ben. I'll be honest with you. And he points out, does Ben, the Supreme Court said 9-0 that this person that was deported to El Salvador needs to be returned for due process. I think if it's an American citizen and they haven't done anything that warrants deportation, I would agree with you, Ben. But as Rhino points out, it's kind of unclear what his status is at this point. The Trump administration, he goes on to say, should follow orders from the Supreme Court. Ben also says our founding fathers would be rolling over in their graves if he goes through with that. Yeah, I also, as much as on the program we've talked about the craziness that is all this transgenderism and gender ideology, I'm not a big fan of the White House directing the National Institutes of Health to study detransition and trans regret. I feel like that's a little political, and I don't want to spend the money on it, honestly. I think the states ought to handle, as we have here in Mississippi and many other states have as well, they ought to handle lawmaking around what's available and legal with respect to gender affirmation or sex transition for minors at a minimum. Now, if you're an adult, I don't really care. But as far as minors are concerned, where the minor really doesn't have a say in such action, any kind of sex change should be barred, in my view, for a minor. Should just not be allowed. That ought to be handled at the state level. We're out of here today. Thanks so much for joining us. Back with you again tomorrow. Until then, stay safe and God bless.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.